Welcome to the Mindset Connection podcast. This is our very first episode. We are so happy to finally be doing this project. We are your hosts. I'm Jen Clearwaters, and this is Cindy O'Connell. And our show is really going to showcase everyday changemakers who are doing extraordinary things in the fields of mental health and wellness. So we are hoping that you're going to find our guests as inspiring as we do. And Cindy is going to introduce our very first guest, who is an incredible change maker.
As I introduced my longtime friend of 40 years, I was amazed when I asked him for his bios, of what I did not know about his accomplishments, which are many. So I'm just going to highlight a few. And just to get it straight, 27 years as a police officer. 40 plus years as an attorney,
Goodness.
40 years as an instructor at the Ocean County Police Academy, adjunct professor at Fairleigh Dickinson, consultant for the Rogers Group, where he is an expert on use of force, criminal law, and racially influenced policing. He's a recipient of numerous awards in all of those areas. Then in his spare time, he went back and got an additional master's degree in administration. So Bob has two very talented daughters that were excellent in gymnastics. And since the coaching at the high school was not up to the caliber of his daughters, Bob decided that he would volunteer and coach there. Only he also went around the country to different clinics at colleges to become basically an expert in gymnastics and became a well-respected high school coach. And then when his older daughter showed an affinity for pole vaulting, Bob did the same thing. And now he continues to coach at the high school level and has also coached at the college level. And he has created many champions in pole vaulting. So it is our pleasure to welcome retired police captain Robert J. Dikun to our podcast, The Mindset Connection.
Well, thank you. Thank you both.
We're so happy you're here.
Thanks for having me.
Yes. So earlier in the year, I know we had reached out to you because I work in therapy with law enforcement officers who had been going through academy training and felt that they were not prepared for what they would see. They were told what they would prepare, what they would see on the job, but not how to deal with the stress. And so when Cindy and I were talking about that, she reached out to you and you had us come in and do a training for the Ocean County Police Academy, the class 1, so the brand new people. We had an amazing experience doing that, and we felt that it was very helpful. But we also know that that is not the norm to have people coming into the police academy to teach stress reduction. And maybe what you could do is kind of give us a synopsis of what has changed in law enforcement since the time that you started to up to now.
So much. So I would have started like many officers in New Jersey. We started as a seasonal officer and then went to a full-time officer. And I actually started in the late 70s. And to a certain extent, the late 70s were fairly similar to the early 2020s. There were a lot of changes that were going on. But over that 40-some year period, so much has changed. I mean, technology, things that exist now. I mean, it was like watching an episode of The Jetsons when you were a kid. You're never, ever going to see things like that. Yeah. The makeup of law enforcement has changed. Back in the late 70s, it was rare that you would have a woman in law enforcement. It was almost as rare that you would have a black male, let alone a black female. The same with the Latinos. Yep. So the makeup has changed of what police work is all about. It's changed so much. Go back to the 70s. Terrorism was something that you read about, heard about in Europe and in other places in the world, let alone here in the United States. There were changes when you dealt with social programs that police now became responsible to. So when you were back in the 70s and 80s, you probably didn't have the training that you do now. Learning about autism, learning about Alzheimer's disease to be able to deal with other people. The training that you have for first responders, AED training, CPR. it existed back then, but it was pretty rudimentary. Where
Yeah.
now it's really, really, really improved, and it's really, really enhanced. The case laws have changed. The weaponry has changed. The psychology has changed. The focus has changed. When you take a look at it and you go back into the 70s was designed, law enforcement, you're crime fighters. Now you're more community police oriented. You're there to engage in a partnership with the community to try to find root problems and to find a lot of different solutions for it. So it bears little resemblance to what it did back in the 70s. What hasn't changed is you still have to depend on the men and women that are doing the job to get the job done. The human element hasn't really changed that much.
No. So how are you continuing to help the officers in training deal with what they are going to see, because it is so different now?
It's different from what they see. It's different from what the expectations of the public are. I think when you take a look at it, there's been a time where it's almost unrealistic, because if you watch Law and Order, for example, a homicide takes place at 10 after, they make an arrest at 20 after, and at 10 minutes of,
it's all
there's a
wrapped up.
conviction, and they don't see the thousands or tens of thousands of hours that are actually going into it. So a lot of times what you're doing is you are reframing what beliefs are of your police candidates, because they only know what they see on television or they see in the movies. So you're trying to get real with them as to what it's all about. Today, in the year 2024, our younger people, through no fault of their own, it's not a fault, and it's certainly not going to be a liability. They don't have the same experiences as the youth did 40 and 50 years ago.
Yeah, true.
They've been, I want to say they've been protected a little bit more by parents and society. So the education that goes into them has also changed. You have to create experiences for them. Otherwise, what'll ultimately happen is they will get engaged in a critical incident and not have the skills to be able to handle it. So you're trying to do the best you possibly can with it.
Yeah.
One thing that I just want to reiterate that you just said, several: focus, reframe, and experience. 3 critical points for our youth. And whether they're going into law enforcement or they're just living their lives. But that just really struck out to me.
They
Thank
need
you for
that.
those.
They
Yeah,
need that.
for sure.
In coaching, it's exactly the same thing.
Yeah. We just
You
talked
ju-
about
th-
that.
this is one of our
Yes,
questions.
this
Go
is one of our
ahead.
questions.
Well, when you take a look at it, a lot of the candidates that you get in law enforcement, the overwhelming majority were involved in some kind of team activity.
Yeah.
Most of it being involved in athletics. And they really get a lot of good skills and good skill sets from it. So it's important that they do that. But the problem is the weaknesses that they have, the issues that they experience in high school, they're bringing them right into the law enforcement community. And I'll often say to some of the academy trainers, hey, this is one thing you got to look out for, because I'm dealing with high school kids now. They're different from what they were before. Not better, not worse, just different. And a lot of times we have to enhance the training.
How do you do that? How do you take that mindset and change it so they're not dragging their past into, a new environment?
It's difficult. I'm doing it at a high school level now. And I think probably one of the biggest issues that we deal with at the high school level in athletics, the athlete mindset has changed.
Yes.
40 and 50 years ago, it was, I will, or at the very least, I'll try. And now we start off with, I can't. So for me, the one thing when it comes to self-confidence is to get them to move along the line to, okay, let's at least try with it. I'm not asking you to be a daredevil, not asking you to do anything that I don't think you can physically do, but let's start moving along to build that self-confidence, because it's just like any activity. Once you build that self-confidence, they're going to improve. They're going to be happier. they're going to be able to deal with failure.
Mm-hmm.
Because at this point, our younger people, they struggle with failure. And you have to give them these skills in order to get over that. You know, it's a lot of other things. They have more opportunities than what we had. Greater
That's
amount of
true.
By
sports,
far.
Yep,
greater
by
amount
far.
of activities.
Mm-hmm.
So trying to focus is going to be a challenge. Throw in social media, you have another element that really serves as a distraction.
Yeah.
It's got great utility, but it also is the devil in certain areas. And then the final thing that I see, because I'm getting younger people who experience COVID, they were home, they're trying to play catch up. They just are. You can see it. There were a lot of things
Very
that they
real.
weren't able to
Very
do.
real.
Yes.
Yep.
So it's hard. They're all over the place. They're a cat on a hot tin roof. That's the
Yeah.
way I always describe it. But there's ways to get around it, and the kids respond well to it. Kids respond to structure.
They
There's
No
ifs, ands,
question.
or buts about
No
it.
Yep.
question.
No question.
No question. You know,
Mhm.
I just want to go back and say, you know, gymnastics, pole vaulting, those are two incredibly difficult, you know, and, you know, you're talking about fear of overcoming both of those sports.
Yeah.
So when you said, you know, I'll try, and I'm going to let you feel safe. How important is that in this world to feel safe and comfortable with a trusted adult? And I think
Huge.
that that's something that you have accomplished.
Yeah.
It is.
Well, because
no
a lot
question.
of people don't even have a trusted adult, not one anywhere. So the fact that they have someone, even one person, a lot of the research will say if you have one trusted adult, you have a way better chance.
Well, I think what it comes down to, it takes work.
Yes,
It takes
it does
effort. But you have to be able to relate to kids. So, I mean, when it comes down to it, at a young 15-year-old, he's wearing a musical group T-shirt that he was pretty surprised that I recognized. Or I was
They
drawing.
don't think you would know.
I was drawing an analogy to one of my senior girls. She's just short of 18. She also plays tennis. So I was drawing a relationship between getting to the box and pole vaulting, running down the runway, the same way that she would attack the net when somebody lobs in a ball. So I think a lot of what you do is you just want to find something that you can relate to, because, you know, it is a little bit different for me. I'm older than just about all their grandparents.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I had a young girl, a young freshman, and I was waiting for a family member to come pick her up, and I said, you know, Brianna, do you have somebody coming to get you? She said, oh, my grandmother's coming, because she drives really, really slow. And I said, well, that sometimes happens. Well, I think it has a lot to do with that. She's really, really old. And I said, well, how old is your grandmother? And she said, I think she's 57. And
Oh,
I
boy.
said, oh my God, that's it for me.
We're ancient.
So whether or not they recognize that a few years older than 57, I don't know. But if you try to relate to them, but at the same time, hold them responsible. Provide the actual structure. Have expectations for them. But at the same time, you want to be very positive with them. You want to have that encouragement. But for me, I've always been honest with kids. If they're not having a good day, I'm going to tell them they're not having a good day. If they didn't have a good meet, hey, there's things that we have to work on.
Yeah.
But I'm also going to be honest with them that, hey, you had a great day today. And I had that with several kids just this morning, where you want to compliment them when they are having a good day. You want to kind of help them along when they're not. And occasionally you want to give them a little bit of a push when they need it.
And it's hard because I think a lot of young people have a hard time dealing with failure.
Oh,
You know, a lot of people just shut down or they don't want to hear it. And so it's good that you are letting them know when they're not performing at their best.
And it also sounds as if you are allowing them to enjoy the process,
Mhm.
because it's not
It's a
just the end
process.
result.
Yeah.
It's every step that I'm taking, that run down the runway, placing the pole in the right position. It's every bit of the process to enjoy everything. I had a bad day. Okay. Next day is a new day. I
Yeah.
had a great day.
Mhm.
Next day is a new day. So,
Well, it's ever since I started coaching, I frame things into the process that it is a process.
yes.
It's an ongoing
Yeah.
process, whether or not at the high school level, collegiate level, post-collegiate level, everything is a process. You're going to have success, you're going to have failures. The idea is not to have the glory of the failure, or the successes last so long that they interfere with the progress. And on the other side of the coin, failures are rarely terminal. Only failure I know is terminal is when you die. Everything else is
Yeah.
going to be, you can remedy it.
Yeah.
You can change it. And that's what we try to do. Let's get a good start on things. And I think it's important. I think that's a skill level that needs to be developed with young people.
So how do you do that? Like even with the law enforcement recruits and, athletes, they might lose a game and then they're, depressed for a week, can't get out of bed or whatever it is. And even the issues even that I'm hearing from my law enforcement officers who are coming in saying, well, this happened to me on the job. Sometimes they're having a hard time getting past it.
It's not easy. And
No.
what you'll find is, and you both experienced it in a police academy setting.
We sure did.
I was startled. I was overwhelmed. I was flabbergasted. If I would have asked the same questions that the both of you asked to an academy class 40 years ago, I may, if I was lucky, I would have gotten one candidate who would have admitted issues of anxiety, issues of depression,
Sleep.
issues of self-doubt. When you asked the question, I was startled to the point where, did I just hear what I just heard? Because the overwhelming majority of young people have those issues. And again, I'm going to relate back to it. I think some of it is hopefully temporary in nature. I think COVID contributed to that.
No
Sure did.
question.
I
No
think
question.
things are
Absolutely.
changing. We laugh about it to a certain extent. I'm a dinosaur because I'm 30 years older than anybody I coach with. But they look at it a little bit differently. I said I'm old school. It's okay to be old school. I can encourage a youngster positively the same way that I can probably be a little bit more critical than anybody else ever would, because they're not going to develop, because nobody in their life has been critical. And you can do it in a way where you start with critical and then you end up with positive. And that's the way that they're going to remember it. It's no different. People aren't going to remember what you said to them. Somewhere down the line, they're going to remember how you made them feel.
That's true.
And that becomes
Maya Angelou.
Yeah,
that-
Maya Angelou in the book.
That's it.
That's who it is.
And that's what you try to do every
Yeah.
day. I mean, every practice session, I try to personalize it. And it was the same thing. I was very, very close with my recruits, very, very hard on them. I had great expectations with it, but I still have many, many, many friendships with younger people who just, they related to it. They enjoyed it. They found that, wait a second, the structure that I never had in life, I really like this.
I think that's why we were so successful with getting so many people to answer honestly, because they felt comfortable.
Yeah.
Like they were already comfortable before we walked in.
Yes.
And that was you.
And that's you.
That was you.
Yeah, that's because
Yeah.
of you. Because we literally had people debating us about, I can't watch television and fall asleep. Why not?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And asking us to come back and talk about more things. The
Mhm.
questions when we did the review, the evaluations, they weren't, if they didn't feel comfortable speaking already before we walked in there, they never would have.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's kind of interesting. Even the phrase resiliency, that had a different meaning 5 years ago. It had a totally different meaning 20 years ago.
Yes.
Yep.
Now, I think it's so different where don't keep things in, talk about it. You're having an issue. You need to let me know. And, if I need to refer you to somebody that's a professional, that's what I'm going to go ahead and do. I think for such a period of time, especially in law enforcement and even in athletics, nobody wanted to show the chink in the armor because you were a
You're
lesser
less
man,
than.
a lesser woman, a lesser athlete, a lesser police officer. I think that's changed quite a bit, and we're better off because
Yeah.
of it.
And we're seeing
Most
that. We're
definitely.
seeing that, and a lot more people in both areas are
Yeah.
seeking help when they need it.
I can think back many different incidents, especially in law enforcement, where young people turned into middle-aged people,
Mhm.
and they never recovered from the ability to be able or the inability to be able to cope, because back then you weren't going for professional help,
Yeah.
professional counseling,
Yeah.
because
Wasn't
the
around.
fear the
Right.
fear in law enforcement was,
If
"Ooh,
anybody found out.
you're going to
Yep.
go to the rubber gun squad.
Yep.
You're going to be counting paper clips. You'll go to the motor pool." And I think now we're getting to it a lot quicker.
How could you do your job? This is what I actually say to my people in these areas. How can you do your job when what you see is traumatic at times?
Oh.
You have to be able to learn how to get it out.
I think what happens is, too, as we got to the year, I'll use 2024 as the example, where before, when I started with it, I started with more quote unquote grizzled veterans. All right. A lot of them had military experience. A lot of them, they went to school of hard knocks. They didn't go to
Right.
an Ivy League university. So they had a kind of a better understanding that, okay, I'm going to watch so-and-so. He or she, and occasionally you had a woman back then, 40 years, they're handling it in a different way.
Mhm.
That's the way I guess I have to handle it. And we're
Yeah.
finding now it's a little bit more personal. It's not the cookie cutter approach where you treat everybody exactly the same way. I always say, especially in coaching, I don't treat everybody the same, but I treat everybody equally, because everybody's going to have different needs. Everybody's going to have different wants. They're going to have different strengths, different weaknesses. And if you don't treat people as an individual, they don't have a chance really to prosper. They
I
don't
love
have
that.
a chance
I do
to
too.
really
I love
develop.
it too.
What a great way to put
So-
it.
And did you do that when you were a captain in the police force?
I think I did.
Yeah.
Yeah. I
think
That's
it's
I think that's
Love
why you
that.
were so well loved
Yep.
too.
I think it was
Respected.
a little
And
bit,
loved.
Yeah.
I attended his retirement party.
There's
Yeah.
lots of love there.
Yeah.
You know what it is? It's a little bit of a different focus. When you're dealing with a 14-year-old, you're going to be a little bit more empathetic.
Mhm.
And it doesn't mean I'm not going to be empathetic with a 22-year-old or a 26-year-old or a 28-year-old. But you know what? It's going to be a little bit of harder love that they probably never got. With coaching, it's a little bit different, especially with youngsters. College, was pretty much a little bit different in that, in high school, you're getting people ready for college. In college, you're getting people ready for life.
Yeah.
And I always used to say to parents, hey, my job is to coach them up. You love them up. And when they need to be loved up at practice, after meets and things like that, hey, you know what? Let them grieve a little bit. If I have a youngster that doesn't do well in a meet, let them be. Let them lick their wounds for a little bit. Let them
You
get
gotta
the
feel it.
emotion out.
Yeah.
And then chat it up a little bit. And let's talk about what went right. And let's talk about what we need to really what we need to start moving towards. And within 10, 12 minutes, they're back to being their
Wouldn't we
normal
love
self.
that to everyone to
I
just
know.
focus on what went well?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
So, are you thinking about another career?
probably.
Well, you know what? Therapist.
Oh,
I see
God, I don't know.
therapist
Come
in
on.
your future. You can work with Jen.
Yes.
we laugh. My wife being one of them. When the kids will say, Dad, for the daughters, or a lot of the other athletes, or people in law enforcement, your husband was, unbelievable listening ear, was a soft ear, and it's a different. You're in a different zone. You're in a different environment. But I think there's going to be those times, and you're not always going to be right. Sometimes you got to be a little bit harder with some kids, and
Yeah.
sometimes you got to be a little bit
No
softer.
question. No question.
Just the way it is, and I think it's the same with adults. You guys know better than I.
I think when you took the oath to serve the public, you took it to heart, because that's really what it is. Like, Jen and I teach people, you're not really helping. When I say I'm helping someone, it sounds as if I know more than they know and I'm assuming that they need help. But when I say serve, what can I do for you?
Yeah, without
And
expectation.
that's the attitude. And I think that's one of the reasons you're so successful. How do you view failure? And I think you kind of answered this, but I wanted to
not for the people you work with,
for yourself.
The older I've gotten, the better I'm at coping with failure.
Yep.
I think what happens now is, and I try to convey this, especially to young people, let's take the positives out of it. I think in your book, you talk about responding rather than reacting. Responding, making a determination as to, okay, what caused this problem? Let's get to the core root, and let's create some alternatives. Let's figure out what the best alternative is, and let's go ahead and change. I think what happens is people get paralyzed by failure, and what happens with failure in a lot of situations, and whether or not it's police work, whether or not it's in athletics, people fail because they're afraid of change. And they can change well in advance, but they just don't like to. They like to be in the comfort zone. And when we go to, especially our young people, they have such a difficult time dealing with failure because they have to acknowledge that they're not as good as what they've been told they are throughout their lives. And for me, it's getting them out of their comfort zone to figure out, okay, listen, it's not fatal. You're not less of a person. You're going to get better because of it. Let's change the script.
Yeah.
And let's try something different. And I tell kids all the time, listen, I got 100 different ways to solve your problem. And if we go through 100, I'll create 100 more. They have to know that there is hope.
That's great.
And there's alternatives.
Yep. And Cindy and I always say, the failure that you have in life are lessons.
Oh, they are.
Yeah, there are lessons
No
to learn. Like sometimes you got to
question.
think, why is this happening for me, and what can I do about it?
Yeah.
You know that you've connected when somebody says, "I understand. It'll never happen again," because they've already made the turn.
Yeah.
They figured it out, and they said, "Okay, I didn't do it right. I accept it. Let me go ahead and move on."
Right.
Yeah.
And you do it in a dignified way. You don't humble people into change. You kind of show this is where it's going to work for you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So what are your 3 strengths? Your personal 3 strengths. First things that
Probably
come to
more
your
than
head.
3.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure you have, I know you have more, but what do you think that, like, is in your core? What are your 3 strengths?
Well, I learned from my father many years ago, you need to surround yourself by the best people, because you're not going to be the best at everything. If you're lucky in life, you might be really good at a few things. So I've always been able to check the ego at the door and surround myself with the best people. Whether or not it was practicing law, I worked with the best attorneys. Whether or not it was in police work, I worked with the best officers. Whether or not it was in athletics, I worked with the best coaches. I think recognizing that was probably number 1. Number 2, I kind of touched on perseverance. You have to let kids know that we're going to keep on going. We're not quitting on you. I had a girl tell me that she had a coach once tell her that she should never, ever do athletics. And it broke my heart to hear that. And I said, you don't have to ever worry about that. You have a place here, and you're only going to get better, and we're going to figure that out. And I think the other thing I also touched on is I want to relate to people. You have to be in a position to be able to show them, I'm really no different than you. I just have a little bit more training, a little bit more experience. You're going to be doing the same thing that I'm doing, and you're probably doing it at a higher level. So I think that's probably the 3.
And it's really nice because people could look at your credentials and feel very intimidated.
Yes.
Like, I don't want to talk to that guy. My God. But you walk in just as you without the titles, then you are approachable.
I learned that in athletics. I was out at the Olympic Training Center, and we were preparing athletes for the Olympic trials. This is back 12 years ago. And I was working with the head coach there. And I kind of smiled, and I kind of had a smirk on my face, and I started laughing, and he goes, "What's so funny?" I said, "The same thing that you're telling these Olympic athletes, it's the same thing I tell my 13 and 14-year-old kids." And what he said to me was, "There you go. You don't need to be here anymore. You have figured it out." It's the same thing.
Yeah.
When we look at it, we got to watch Mondo Duplantis last night win the men's pole in the Olympics. I used him as an example today with a bunch of high school kids. Not that they're going to be jumping 20 feet 6 inches, but watch his run. It's identical. Watch his jump. They're identical. Watch his mindset. He's not getting focused in by looking at his phone or doing a selfie with the crowd. He's in the zone.
Yeah.
Because that's how important it is. So I think there's a lot of little stories and a lot of examples you can give people.
I love that.
And another thing that I'm going to say is one of your strengths is your curiosity.
Oh.
You are curious about the world, and you are willing to learn. I mean, how many people just do what you did, traveled around the country?
Yeah, I don't know anything about this. Let me go figure
it
out.
Let me go learn.
Yeah, let me go learn.
That's the thing that, I mean, Jen and I, when we wrote the book, we learned. We were like, wait, I don't know about this. This sounds like something people need to know. Let me learn about it first. Let me try it on myself. And I see you as, I mean, otherwise you would never have been as successful. Yeah. So when you say, I have 100 more ways to help you to do this, they believe you because they know your training.
And I think as you get older, you have to still keep that window for curiosity open.
Yeah.
Like you can't just say, well, this is it. This is all there is.
Yeah.
We're always saying to people, what's the next thing that you can do? What's next? We're saying that for us. What's next for us? What are we going to do next?
Yeah.
So you got to keep that
It's
interest.
important. And I think for me, it's trying to stay on even keel with the people I coach, the people I instruct, the people I work with. It was always important to me when you take a look at it. I mean, I retired from full-time police work 7 years ago. A lot has happened in 7 years.
Oh.
But the fortunate part was I wanted to contribute. So I continued on, and I worked as a school resource officer up in Long Branch, which is more of a urban, more of a city school. I wanted to learn a little bit more about it. It was awesome. It was a great experience. And that's why I say to people, hey, try out different things. You just don't know what you're going to find. Valerie Allman, who won the women's discus, she wasn't born a discus thrower. She was a dancer.
Yeah.
Yes.
A dancer.
Yes.
And somebody encouraged her, hey, why don't you go ahead and try this? And here she is. I mean, she's a 2-time gold medalist in the women's discus. And she has transformed what discus throwers do on the female side, what they look like.
Exactly.
She's just lightning fast. And she's not lightning fast from being in the weight room. She's lightning fast because she danced.
Exactly.
So, I mean, people don't realize that you're going to have these different moments that are going to allow you to really prosper that you don't expect.
Yeah, because you can't stay stuck.
Yeah.
So what's going well in your life?
Oh, everything.
We're always trying
How many
to get
people say that?
I'm
what's
hanging
going
out with
well?
you. Everybody in my family's healthy, happy. As you know, new grandchild, our first. She's the light of our life. She's the light of everybody's life. It couldn't be better. It's enjoyable. As you well know, with coaching, it sometimes gets a little frustrating. But frustration, it causes you to be a little bit more introspective. What am I not doing right? How do I connect? And like today was a great day because 2 kids that have been struggling, they weren't today. So for me, it was an awesome day, and I'll have another awesome day tomorrow, I'm sure.
And that's what we are always trying to get people to embrace the practice of gratitude and identifying what went well, because if you look at the world, there's a lot of bad things going
Ugh.
on. And people get stuck in that. And, you might have 5 great things that happen and one thing that goes wrong. That's what everyone focuses on. You'll focus on the one thing that didn't go well, and then you can't recover.
I think it's important. I'll watch a news channel. Typically, watch it every night, and probably only one reason I watch it, and it's Channel 7 at 6:30. It's because the last clip that they
Yes.
do is some kind of a positive that's
thing.
going on in life.
Huh, the
And-
other channels aren't doing that.
No, it's wreckage and ruin
Yes,
and chaos.
terrible.
And to see that, okay, we're leaving the telecast on a positive, it doesn't
Yeah.
get better than that.
Very true.
Yeah.
I'm a big proponent of training. I think we need to spend more time on training. I think what happens when we had the economic downturn, especially in law enforcement, emergency services, firefighting, it got drummed into everybody's head: do more with less, do more with less, do more with less.
Mm.
And we got away from doing more with more. And I think what has happened in training, and what I take from it, and I take it from not only the law enforcement side, but also from athletics. There's too many people that dwell on the negative. We've kind of touched on
Yeah.
that. You can't constantly tell people what they can't do.
Mm-hmm.
There comes a point in time where you have to have the positive. You have to give them the tools as to what you can't do. So, for example, when you take a lot of directives in law enforcement, 99% of the directive is not telling you what you can do. 99% of the directive is telling you what you can't do.
Mhm.
And I think what happens, especially for our younger people today, they learn much better by being told the positive of what you can do.
No
You
question.
accent the
Yes.
positive, don't accent the negatives. And I think we've kind of gotten away from that. I think for me, we need to get back to that. You can still have structure, you can still have discipline, but you can still give people tools. But it takes money and it takes time. And the way that things are, we're not seeing probably the correct amount of money, funding that's going into training. Although there's a lot of training that's going on, a lot of it that's going on. It's mandated, whether or not by the state or by the actual federal government. It's all good. Don't take it the wrong way. But there's other training that is needed, and it's very vital, especially for our younger people, and it's being bypassed.
Yeah, it's a really good reminder.
It is a good
Yeah,
reminder.
but-
So all right, we talking law enforcement? Are we talking students? Tell me something for law enforcement that would be a good training, like a positive.
I mean, real life, practical use of force training.
Yeah.
I think what it comes down to is what we saw throughout the years, and because I am a use of force instructor, and you look at things and you say, people say, why did that officer go to deadly force right off the bat?
Right.
And I will say 90 times out of 100, he or she went to use of force because they weren't adequately trained in lesser modalities. They were afraid to go hands-on with somebody. They were afraid to go to a lesser device, whether or not to go to a baton or to a controlled energy device or to something that was less lethal, because there's not enough time in the day to train. I think a lot of times we're just missing some of the real important things. We can prevent more tragedies than what are happening. And a lot of the training is very, very good, and it is having an impact in preventing more tragedies. We can do more.
Yeah.
We just can.
Well, we're starting to wrap up.
Hmm.
So we are so fortunate to be able to work with you and get to know you. But if there are listeners out there that want to get to know you more or have questions or want to contact you or just know more about the amazing work you're doing, how can they do that?
Usually my email address is probably best. It's the numeral 1 Alita, ALETA 1 Alita 1 at Comcast.net.
Perfect.
And it may well be that there's just a parent out there that
Yeah.
I have my son or daughter involved in athletics and they're not enjoying it, and or something else that
Yeah.
might be coming from it.
Yeah.
I spend 10 minutes with them. If we can save a kid in athletics.
Wonderful.
That'll be a pretty good day.
That's saving a
whole
life.
nother-
That's
whole
saving
nother
a life.
podcast
It is.
episode.
It is.
I'm sure.
So we always ask these questions at the end of each podcast, and this is actually from our book.
Mhm.
So is there something in your life that you would like to change?
Probably not. If there is one thing, probably it's a mind over matter thing. I've learned the older I've gotten that the little things didn't matter as much as I thought they did. There's critical things that are important that you need to spend the time. The rest of it's just plain old noise. If I would have learned that a little bit earlier, a little bit younger, I think I would have gotten a little bit more, but by and large, no regrets.
Okay.
All right.
That's good.
So this is fascinating because we asked these questions to lots of people. I mean, before we wrote the book, it must
hundreds
be
and hundreds of people.
we asked that, and only 2 people said nothing, and they were both males.
Mhm.
Yeah. So interesting. And I think one was in his 30s and one is in his 40s.
Yeah.
And that was it.
Everyone else had something to change.
And then, you
Yeah.
know, the next question would be, what is holding you back? Obviously, you've already recognized, you know, don't focus on the little things. Focus on the big things and, you know, make changes.
There's plenty of important things out in life that you can devote your time to.
That is true.
The little things, the noise, the
No
static,
question.
not important.
Yeah.
No question.
Thank you for being a part of our very first podcast episode.
Yeah.
We're so excited to showcase you and all of the work that you're doing. And when Cindy and I were talking about who we wanted to have as our first guest, it was like
Hands
not
down.
even a question. We were like, we're calling him. He's got to
Thank you.
come.
It's
Yeah,
been-
thank
it's
you
been
we've
fun.
been
Thank you
so
for taking the time.
Grateful for you, you know, giving us your time today and being able to share with everyone else all the great work that you do.
Yeah.
So
Thank you.
we will be back next month with another guest. And if anyone wants to learn more about me or Cindy, our websites, we have very lovely websites that have been created. Mine is www.mindsetnj.com. And Cindy's is www.mindfulnessconnection.com. We are begrudgingly on social media. It's not our area, but we're doing it. We have a YouTube channel for our book at The Elevation Principles. And our name of our book is The Elevation Principles, and that is available on Amazon. There's a link to the book on both of our websites as well. So you have one more thing to say at the
Yes,
end,
one more
Cindy?
thing. So just remember to pause, breathe, and respond. Thank you so much.
Thank you.